Scott?
Yeah, so well, just before Orbin starts, thanks Scott again. And I think basically, thanks for the overview. And also I think RAM is a very established asset management company. And last year, you and your team have shown how you all tap into that market opportunity and make a good returns. So a big thumbs up from us and also our happy clients. So now the next speaker, Orbin, I would like to invite Orbin over to share with us. Again, another very interesting real estate landscape in Australia. Orbin, over to you, please.
Thank you, Desmond, and thanks, Scott, for your speech. Just a bit of a background on me. The topics I'll cover will be obviously, who we are at Resi West, and Scott gave us an overview of the economy. I'll just briefly discuss a couple of those. My focus will be on Western Australia. There will be a bit of an overview of Australia, but predominantly Western Australia. I'll go through the property markets as a whole of Australia and show you with some independent property clocks in both commercial and residential and housing and units. We'll then go through a bit about the jobs seen in Australia and the employment outlook. Again, I'm going to be predominantly discussing things that are relevant for Western Australia at the moment, and I would suggest that a lot of these would be relevant for your clients too, Desmond, with people wanting to come. And then I'm going to give you some investment opportunities that we've selected in various states of Australia. I'll be coming back to, again, a focus on Western Australia. And one of the groups you guys probably would have known of is Far East Consortium. We deal with them quite a lot around Australia, and they're a Hong Kong listed company. Their credentials sort of speak for themselves. So just to start on myself, I've been involved in property since about 1989, I gather. So quite a bit of time in property. Most of that has been in Australian property. A lot of it's been in residential and in Western Australia. My focus, I guess, in the last 12 years has been in marketing Australian property overseas, Malaysia being one of the places that we were, up until the pandemic, able to come once a month, and we genuinely miss the times that we come up to Malaysia, and spending time with Desmond and the crew up there is always good fun. So Resi West has been around for some time. I myself, as I say, have had over 25 years experience in property and helping people to locate investments that suit their own situation, and everyone's situation is unique to themselves. And I find whilst there are very few that are identical cases. So we really analyse what people want out of the property, what they want it to achieve, and then we will assist in finding those for them. So when we go through the slides that I've got, there will be a broad brush. So if we can just span to the next one, I'll be putting it into segments, and there's I guess the first thing that I'd like to talk about would be the economy in Australia. And I've just got a couple of slides that are, it's easy for me to talk about it. It's another thing to demonstrate it with facts that are coming to us. So through this pandemic, I guess to date, we've been relatively unscathed. As Scott put it, there's only 10 cases in Victoria, and it's shut down. And, Western Australia is even harsher than that. We get 1 or 2 cases here, and the whole state's completely locked down, which, people have their own views on it, but it's keeping us safe. And the powerhouse of our economy is mining. Western Australia in particular has always been, and probably will always be, a mining-based sort of town or city, or set of cities. So when you look at where we are now, things like iron ore, for argument's sake, we've got massive growth in the prices of iron ore, and there's record numbers of it coming out of the ground. And Western Australia, if we just skip down to two slides down, Western Australia accounts for nearly 60% of all of the mining investment over the last, period. We've just got all the commodities that the world needs. And in a pandemic like this, we're in a situation where the world needs to have an infrastructure growth phase in order for the jobs market to come back on stream. And Western Australia certainly is one of the only places in the world that if you want something like iron ore today and you don't want to wait 3 years, you can get it today. So from that perspective, our economy is doing exceptionally well. Western Australia is the powerhouse of Australia at the moment because of that. And the jobs and the numbers that we've got here sort of speak volumes. As we go down here, these next 3 slides are the national property clocks. So we go through industrial, commercial, and where each city or each part of Australia is at the moment. From an investment point of view, from 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock is probably the best opportunity that we've got. And if you look at the places that are in that bottom of the market through the rising market, you'll see that Perth, over the 3 of them, so whether it be industrial or commercial on this slide, we're in the start of the recovery phase. The next one, if you go down to one more, we've got the housing market. We'd be in the rising market there. And what's happened is over the last, let's say, 8 months, we've gone from being very static in the growth phase of Perth. We've sort of gone down when the rest of the country's gone up. And now we're going up a rate of knots. Properties are not sitting on the market for very long. In fact, we would have a home open. We're meant to be having one shortly. And we expect 20 to 30 groups of people through on any home open that we have in any property in any suburb. And, substantial amounts of offers coming in on all of those properties over and above what the asking prices are. And then if you tick down the next one, which is the apartment market, you'll see that Perth is in the start of the recovery phase. We're finding that more and more investors are starting to come back from Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, other places, and come into the Perth market, in particular in the apartment sector. We've got a shortage of properties. We've got a shortage of properties for sale. We've got a shortage of properties for rent. And as we go down again in the slides, we'll find here that there's articles now where a year or so ago there was negative press. All of a sudden now we're finding we're at that start of the recovery phase, and the articles that are coming out in the papers are demonstrating that we're actually in the growth phase now of the apartment market, as well as everything else to do with residential property. The next slides are from REWA, which is the Real Estate Industry of Western Australia and Institute of Western Australia. We've got 3 or 4 slides here which show both the listing for sale and the rental market. You'll see that we've got a decline in listings of rentals, and we've also got a decline in days for selling them. There's also a rapid decline in the residential rental vacancy rates, going from about 7.8% 3 years ago, and we're down to less than 1%. In some instances, we're less than 0.5%. So when you get that sort of situation, you end up with people scrambling over themselves to rent the same property. And then you've got people paying more than what the asking price of the rent is. Therefore, you're starting to get stronger yields. So we're at the right end, not the wrong end of the market when it comes to that. And if we go down just a couple more slides here, you'll see one that says the median weekly asking rents for houses and also for apartments. So possibly skip down another 2 from here. Yep. So what we've got here is in the June quarter. So this is all today's news. You'll see that the biggest growth in the asking rents for houses around Australian capital cities is Perth, with a growth rate of 21.6%. And apartments are also the highest year in terms of the growth, 18.8% we've had over the last quarter. What is driving this in my opinion, is jobs. I think that things are heavily linked to jobs in terms of most industries, properties no different. Back in 2018, if we go down one slide, you'll notice that there was 103,000 people employed in mining. Those numbers are growing at a rate of knots. The healthcare and the social assistance is probably still the #1 industry. But if you look at the next slide down, we've got 40,000 jobs in the mining industry in the next year and a half that are coming. So where does this fit? Basically, with a massive need for skilled migration, we are going to have to get people to come back to Western Australia, whether it be from the East Coast or from overseas, in droves to fill these jobs. And then you've got the impact on the housing that is already at critical stages. So we need to fast track some more apartment buildings to get done. We need to fast track some more housing estates to be built. And then this little slide here is interesting. This was actually from yesterday. If you are looking for a job in Western Australia, there's an app called seek.com.au. So you go on to Seek. If you want to be involved in the mining industry, it's FIFO, or fly in, fly out. And you hit WA, as you'll see here on the top of the screen, there's 5,194 jobs available in fly in, fly out work in Western Australia yesterday. Those numbers are up from about 500. So we're tenfold of where we were a year and a half ago. So in terms of the impact of the pandemic, from a jobs perspective, it's been a very positive one with Australia, and in particular, Western Australia's got 4.3% unemployment. So most people that want a job have got one. As we go down, further down in the page here, we've got some opportunities, or we just discussed a little bit about where the exploration, etc., is coming from. And so you'll see on the right-hand side of that graph that iron ore still accounts for over 50% of all the exploration, mining and petroleum employment. As we go down the page here, we've just got a bunch of information on several developments throughout Australia. And I just wanted to sort of paint a picture on the Far East Consortium for those that don't know of them, but they are a Hong Kong-based company with, I guess, subsidiaries in most states of Australia and also in the UK. This particular building here has sold about 80% in the first week of going to market. This represents roughly 10% of the whole of the Brisbane CBD, Queen's Wharf developments and integrated resort development, where you've got 3 or 4 5-star hotels, huge amounts of shopping, apartments and retail and office space. As we go down again, if we just quickly go through these, we've got Queen's Wharf, I just discussed. The next one is a Piermont development in Sydney, which is yet to be constructed. Then we go to Melbourne, where we've got Westside Place, which has got 2,800 odd apartments in it. Stage 1's completed. Stage 2 and 3 are under construction at the moment. So they're a big developer. They choose sites very carefully. The next one we have is one of my personal favourites, is the Gold Coast. I love the beach, as I think, Scott, you do by the looks of your kids there with their surfboards. So this here is an island. It's the Broadbeach Island, where those that know the Gold Coast would have known it as Jupiter's Casino. It's now the Star. We're on to Tower 2 of about 6. So we're on to the Epsilon Tower now. Tower 1's well under construction. A bit like Perth, Brisbane and the Gold Coast are really having a surge at the moment, and Broadbeach, where this development is one of those places that just keeps going from strength to strength. So it's been a very successful project for both us as selling and the Far East for developing as well. And then if we go down, the next 2 slides are sort of showing the same one. So this is an integrated resort development again. It's a joint venture between a bunch of different people with some great connections. Perth itself, for those that don't know Perth, we have a very Mediterranean climate, and we have, it says there 265 days a year of sun, but I would sort of beg to differ. I think we've got more than that. It's a beautiful place to live, beautiful place to be. And now with all of the growth in employment, etc., I think it's a blue sky place really from an Australian perspective. The project that I'm personally invested in this one myself, and Desmond knows about this project from our previous discussions. One of the best projects that I could recommend anybody to get involved in at the moment would be Perth Hub Apartments. And for anyone that wants to discuss any of these opportunities with us in more detail, please either contact Desmond or us directly. Perth's got a significant amount of infrastructure projects that have been underway up until the pandemic, and then we've got more that are happening, you know, post-pandemic. And now one of the more significant ones that's going to bring a lot of business back to the city itself is the Airport Road and Rail, which last night we've been told is due for the first passengers middle of next year. This is going to be about 400 metres from where Perth Hub is ultimately constructed. It's under construction now. So for those that are in that FIFO or fly in, fly out work situation, it's an ideal place to live, where you can go downstairs, grab your coffee, walk 400 metres, you're on the train, and basically you're at the airport and you're at work. We've also got a fairly significant private sector development going on around about 300 metres away from where Perth Hub is, which incidentally is located in the middle of Perth City and Northbridge. For those that know Perth, it's right near the RAC Arena and Chinatown. But the Edith Cowan University is pushing ahead with a $700 million Edith Cowan University City Campus, which is right next door to the picture on the right-hand side there, which is the Yagan Square. So it's around a 300-metre walk to Perth Hub itself. If we can just go down one slide from there, you'll see a brief description of that. And that's going to be completed in 2025, where you've got 9,700 students and a significant amount of workers all going to be congregating on the one space. And Perth Hub only has 314 apartments, so you can imagine the demand for those. We've already touched on, you know, Perth being such a mineral-rich kind of place. Oil and gas is predominantly a component of the employment sector in Perth. The Perth City Link, which is part of the Perth Hub development there. If you go down a couple of slides again, you'll see the actual location here. So there's a view from Perth Hub there. And if you skip down 3 more, you'll see the location that I'm talking about. So Perth Hub there is in pink. The city is obviously to the front of screen, and Northbridge to the back. RAC Arena, you've got at the same time as Perth Hub being built, we'll have a Dorset Hotel, which will be run again by the Far East Consortium. And then you've got a significant amount of both mining and other office spaces around you that are all getting built out. It's probably the most exciting of the locations in Perth, and as I mentioned before, I'm personally invested in this quite heavily in terms of apartment purchases. I've bought more than I probably should have, but it's a project that I feel comfortable with. So look, that really brings me to the conclusion of what I was wanting to talk about. I may have raced a bit through some of those, but I'd like to hand back to Desmond, and if anyone's got any queries, please feel free to ask.
Sure. Thanks, Obin, and thank you for this overview and the property clock throughout Australia. And I think that I agree with you. I have quite a big number of clients who is looking at Western Australia. Everybody hear about Western Australia, and see how Western Australia property bounce back. And I think, you know, there's a lot of interest. And thank you for joining us today, just to share with us, you know, an overview.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I would suggest anybody, who wants to get a professional opinion or advice on how to invest, where to invest, and Orbin certainly is the right person to speak to. Thank you, Sergey. Thanks again.
Thanks,
And Audrey, yeah, so let's proceed with the question, and I'm sure there are some questions for all of us.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Orbin, Desmond, and Scott for a very wonderful presentation. So we can begin the question and answer sessions. Keep the questions coming, everyone, if there's anything that you would like to ask. We already have questions, so I'm going to start off with the ones here first. So the first question, I think, Desmond, this is an immigration-related question. How long does an applicant need to hold the asset of 5 million before applying?
All right.
An asset of 5 million.
Sure. I suppose this question is relating to the 188C.
Correct.
If it is 5 million, it would have been related to 188C visa. The requirements for this visa is to show and to demonstrate that you have a current assets of 5 million. Yeah, so you are not required to demonstrate, how long the assets has been around or how long have you been holding on to the assets. The requirement is it has to be assets with which you currently hold, you or your wife, currently hold, and total up to be 5 million. But of course, there's also another criteria to look into how you actually acquire those assets and where the sources of funds are used to fund the acquisition of those assets. So for example, let's say a property that you have purchased worth 500,000 10 years ago, and today it is worth 1.5 million. So we are basically counting the 1.5 million worth of asset at this point of time. Yeah. So unlike, I guess, some of the people get confused with 188B because there's a requirements to show a longer of assets, a longer periods of asset that you must have held in order for you to be able to apply. But for 188C, it doesn't require you to show how long have you held the assets. You just have to show, the current asset. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, the next question is, this is a fund-related question. So, Scott, if you can help with this. Are returns on the funds taxable, and if yes, at what rate?
The answer is yes, but it's a very good yes. So initially, if you hold a 188B or a 188C or a 188A or a 188E, you will be a temporary resident, and as such, you're taxed like a foreigner. So let's take the SIV, for example, for the whole 5 years, 4.5, it ends up being 5 years that you invest under the complying framework, you will be taxed as a foreigner. So that means you have 0 capital gains tax. You have tax on your income. So if it's bank interest, you'll pay 10% withholding tax. And if it's fund income, such as the fund income that we generate, you'll be taxed at 15%. So Orbin and I find that extremely attractive that foreigners get to have such a low tax rate compared to a resident. If you then, fast forward as Desmond was talking about, and you establish your life further in Australia and you become tax resident, then you're taxed just in a normal scenario. The headline rate there is 47%. That's very scary, but we can spend half an hour with you and tell you very quickly how you can reduce that to a far more palatable level, around about 20%.
Thank you. There's another question on funds as well, Scott, which is, what would be the upfront fees or annual management fees payable on RAM funds? Okay, so the short answer again is very reasonable. So the annual management fees vary from around about 60, 70 basis points, so less than 1% on the annual management fees with property and bond funds and so on, and they go up to about 1% with equity funds, and then the private equity funds are more expensive than that. There is a setup fee. Well, there's no transaction fees, there's no brokerage fees, there's no exit fees, but there is a setup fee of just north of 1.5% if you're an SIV investor, because there's quite a lot of work involved in making sure we get all the boxes ticked for you
with Desmond and the team working in concert there. So those are the fees.
Thank you. Right. This, I guess, it's for Obin. The question just basically says, are there any projects to invest to renew RRV? So this, I believe this question relates to, because when you speak about the resident return visa, it's about establishing a tie in Australia. So having a property in Australia is actually a tie. So Obin, perhaps you can just share about any interesting property that someone can just hold for the purpose of having a tie in Australia. Bye.
Yeah, look, obviously, my understanding is that a part of the requirements are that someone has a house or an apartment of their own here. So we can certainly advise as to what we would think would be an appropriate position for somebody to hold. It really turns back to the point of which state are they coming to, as to where we would sort of recommend people to go. But we have access to properties in every state of Australia, so we're certainly here to assist those people with finding the right mix or the right fit for their personal situation.
Sure, thank you. So I think for more information, if you're keen on this, for the person who's asking, I'm sorry, there's no name mentioned here. Please do get in touch with Obin, all right?
Yeah, we can definitely help you.
Sure. Okay, next question. Again, it's on fund. Can a non-resident invest with RAM, not necessarily for visa purposes?
Absolutely. So we have clients in 16 different countries, but not all of those invest under the migration programs. We have 32 different strategies that clients can invest in. I've just given you less than a dozen today, so there's plenty of opportunity to invest in a broad range of asset classes in Australia or indeed globally. So absolutely is the answer to that.
Sure, thank you. Okay, the next question is an immigration question to Desmond. Please more in 188A how the investment will be used.
Right. So under 188A, the visa requirements is that you must set up a company when after the visa is approved. So depending on which states that you are going to, for example, there are certain states that require you to meet just the very minimal requirement, just as what the federal government is required. There are certain states that require to invest higher amount of investment. But it is, I would say, it is ranging between 200,000 Aussie dollar to 500,000 Aussie dollar. So the steps that you will be going through are first, set up the company, then you have the company's bank accounts. So you move the funds, your money into the company's bank's accounts or the company's accounts. And this money is then going to use towards, the business setup, the running of the company, and also the purchase of the products or services that require you to provide to your clients. So this money is basically, serve as a working capital, where you can use to buy products, equipments, and certain capital that require you to build your business. For those who is taking over, remember, we were talking about one of the options is you can take over an existing company. Let's say you are buying over a company that worth 300,000 and the states require you to invest 400,000. So this 300,000 for the acquisition cost is considered as part of the investment as well. So the bottom line is the money has to be used strictly towards the company and the business running. It is not something that you could use, say, to purchase, a car or the property for your own use. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. The next question is about 188B. If there's a profit in the investment, can it be withdrawn investment or it needs to be reinvested?
Sure. So the requirements for this under this compliant investment is if there's a profit, say there's a distributions, or there's any profits declared, you can take out the profits or the investment, for the purpose of, if you do not wish to be reinvested. So yes, you can. There's no requirements for you to maintain the profits or the distribution throughout the whole entire periods. All you need to be maintained is just, you know, the principal sum. So that perhaps, you know, just lead me to slightly, you know, a steps further. Though I have not seen this happenings with RAM or, you know, most of the cases, but it does stated also in the policy, should, you know, if there's any possibility or any chances where the initial capital investment goes below what they have invested originally, and it is not a requirement for them to top up the difference. Yeah. So I hope that explains. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've just Audrey, just to add to that. So one of the reasons we try and generate a kind of consistent income stream for the clients is because many of them live off that income when they're in Australia. So they've got their kids at one of those lovely universities that Auburn showed on his screen in Perth. You know, their kids will need some sort of, you know, income to live off. The income from these investments can be paid to their, if they've been good, paid to their ANZ bank account in Perth to live off.
Sure. Thank you. This is a question for Ram. Is there any sort of financing assistance provided right now, like in terms of buying a property, especially remotely since borders are closed?
Yeah, so we have a non-bank lending business called Brighton Home Loans. So their specialty is to provide mortgages. So they're a regulated Australian mortgage under the local regulation here for foreigners to buy Australian residencies. So if you wanted to buy an apartment from Auburn, we can provide a mortgage up to a maximum of 70% LVR. So let's say you've got 2 kids, you want to buy 2 apartments, you might want to take a mortgage on those and then gradually pay them down over time, is what we see our clients doing a lot. The mortgage rates for those are a little bit more expensive than they would be for a local resident, because we borrow the funding, but around about 4.5% would be the sort of average rate there, which I think compares favorably to mortgage rates still in Malaysia, for example.
Sure. Thank you. Good to know that. So that actually comes to a related question for Orbin. How much would a 2-room apartment cost you in Perth? So
look, we've got 2-bedroom apartments starting from about $495, so just under the $500,000 mark. It really varies, but let's say for Perth Hub, we've got apartments in that particular building from 2 bedrooms start from about 651 up to around about 730,000 for a penthouse level, 2-bedroom apartment with views over the Swan River, the city of Perth, out towards the ocean in some instances. So very, very affordable, especially when you compare it to other parts of Australia and the world. We've found a lot of our business in the last 12 to 15 months has been a return of residents coming from overseas, and we've got about 160,000 additional people living here that weren't here prior to the pandemic. Most of those are people that are 45 to 55 years old. They've been away for 15 years. They've made a significant amount of money, come back because of the blue sky. They've found it's quite a vibrant place to live now. Mum and dad are here, so they're putting their roots down, and they just can't believe the prices compared to, let's say Sydney or other parts of the world, where they've come from London or other places. So very, very affordable. But to answer your question, from about 500,000 upwards.
Thank you, Obi. Thank you. So there's an immigration question, Desmond. This is for you. There are 2 questions. I'm going to ask you both, which is under the 5 million investment scheme, can it be based on the combined wealth of both husband and wife, of whom one is the visa applicant? That's the first question. You want to answer that first?
Sure. Yeah, so the immigration policy do take into consideration the wealth or the assets owned by husband or the wife, jointly owned, or individually owned, regardless of who is the principal applicants. Yes, you can basically include the assets from your spouse. Yeah.
Second question would be, as for the 2.5 million investment scheme, how would the applicant need to prove he or she has had the wealth? And she need to prove that she has been managing and growing the portfolio as well.
Sure. So I think this question consists of two criteria. The first criteria is the assets of 2.5 million. So in general, you would need to demonstrate that you have an asset worth as at particularly on the 31st of December. For example, if you are not a business owner, so as at 31st of December, 2 years before you applying for this visa, you must have on that particular date an assets of yourself and your spouse worth 2.5 million. Yeah, do take notes. The requirements is 2 years before the visa application. And when we talk about 2 years before the visa application, it is basically 3 different cut-off dates. For example, let's say now it's 2021, right? You will need to demonstrate 31st December 2018 to 31st December 2019 as the first year, and 2019, 31st December to 2020, 31st December as the second year. So that answered the first question. Then the second question, to demonstrate how you were managing your assets. So there is a requirements under this visa class that you must demonstrate, an investment experience, or rather the business experience, 3 years before the visa application. So to demonstrate that, we will have to assess what are your asset class. For example, let's say you own a few property. What do you use with the property? Do you rent it out? What have you been done to increase the value of your assets? Say, for example, if let's say you're investing, part of your portfolio involve share, involve equity, we should demonstrate how do you actually make investment decision, and we should show active transactions that you have taken place over the periods of times. So we will look at, we have to assess your portfolio. From there, we will work out, how to demonstrate that investment experience. Yeah. So it is not straightforward, and it requires a lot of review and, understanding of your backgrounds and your portfolio to be able to advise you on that. But in general, the idea is you should be able to demonstrate that you are not just holding the asset. Let's say, leave most of your money, most of your asset is in the FD, fixed deposit, and this is very difficult to demonstrate the high level investment management experience, because FD generally doesn't require any investment decision making. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next question is for investment question for Scott. What is the minimum amount funds to be invested one shot, or can be invested over time?
So I guess there's two bits to that question. So generally speaking, there's no minimum, well, there's small minimums for our fund. So that's really not, we can make investments for $100,000 or above. With regard to the visas, obviously they have minimum levels being 2.5 million or $5 million. And in terms of whether the way that that gets invested, so you can build them up over time, you can transfer money to us, but you will need to go through a process with Devon of identifying those funds, and those are the funds you use for your visa. And then when you have, so what happens is you have an invitation letter. It says, the government sends you a letter saying we're inviting you to make your complying investment, and then you have about 70 days. So you have to identify the 5 million if it's an SIV, 2.5 million if it's a 188B. Those are the funds you can use, but you can invest them ahead of your visa grant if you wanted to. That's up to you. You can leave them in cash. What we're finding with a lot of clients is that because they're getting zero return from leaving in cash, we've got some lower risk investments that generate around about 5%, where we allow them to park the cash while we're waiting for their visa to come through. So that's what we've seen. So they make the application with you guys, and then while they're waiting for the processing time to come through, we can park it for them in something that will generate obviously a multiple of what they get in a term deposit.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Obin, next question will be for you. Can a provisional PR, that means a temporary resident, buy a residential landed property in Melbourne? If can, what about the stamp duty exemptions for Melbourne? That's the first question. Secondly, what about home builders grant?
So in answer to the first question, I guess that's twofold. The answer initially is yes, they can. you can buy a property as a foreigner, or you can buy a property as a PR, provisional PR, or as a resident. So in answer to that question, yes. In answer to the stamp duty concessions, my understanding is that yes, that is possible for a PR holder. Whether it's for a provisional PR holder, it's something I can definitely find out and get back to you on that one.
Sure, thank you. There's another question for you, Orbit. What do you think about trading in Perth?
Trading?
Yes.
Trading what?
Just any trading business. I think it's just an open question. Any thoughts on the trading industry as a whole?
Yeah, look, depending on what it is that you're selling, most industries are going pretty well in Perth at the moment. It's you know, even dare I say it, our tourism industry is going stronger than it was pre the pandemic, because you've got an influx of people that have come back to Perth, and all those people are holidaying in and around places in Western Australia. It seems at the moment we're in a golden bubble where no matter what industry you're in, seems to be going quite well.
Yeah, just to add on to what Orbin had mentioned about the tourism business. So we basically got 2 nominations from Western Australia State Government for 2 clients who intended to set up a tourism business in Perth just last month. Yeah, June, before the new changes came into effect. So so this is, you know, this tourism business is, you know, is welcome to Western Australia.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing on that. Desmond, next question is for you. If I have a property in Melbourne since 2012, how can this contribute to the 188 visa?
Right. Now, this property in Melbourne generally can be considered or can be counted as part of the 2.5 million assets required for this 188B. However, so this visa is used to qualify the assets net worth criteria. So, and that allows you to apply for that visa. But the 2.5 million strictly under this 2.5, this 188B is going to go into the compliant investment. So eventually you would need to liquidate these assets and to, you know, to be invested through RAM, for example. Yeah. So this asset helps to qualify for the assets worth, I mean, for the net worth required for this asset, but eventually the whole 2.5 million goes into the compliant investment. Yeah.
Thank you, Desmond. Next question is also for you, which is for taking over a company, can it be related to sports? Example, running a badminton hall.
Sure. Yes. So now that also depends on where this person is going to. Let's say if it is going to Victoria, remember I have highlighted the stringent requirements, which I find it is not practical at all on what the current requirements of the Victoria State government. They want innovative, they want technology, and again, you know, like literally they are basically taking in only people who intended to set up this sort of business. And we have done that. We have done one, I think that was in May, for example. So we have a clients who do the seafood packaging. So we had to go to the extent, you know, to introduce some technology where they can trace where this seafood was being caught from the sea. And, you know, there are some technology and some system being in place. So they are not allowed to basically, you know, just export the seafood. So the government wanted to see, you know, there's some level of technology that is being incorporated into the business. Yeah. So, and I can't tell, like, for example, how, you know, a new technology or innovation can be used or to apply under badminton court. Perhaps, you know, this person would have that knowledge and expertise to be able to demonstrate, talk to us. But other than that, you know, if talking about badminton court, running a sports center, yes, this is an acceptable business to most of the state's government.
Thank you. there's another immigration question, which I think is very important, which is if our application is approved, would it cover our children with age above 18 years old? And is the age assessment at the year of approval?
Okay, sure. Now, the age of dependency is up to is the age of dependency for Australian immigration is below 23 years old. So that says, and at what point is important, you know, being 23 years old at times of application or at times of the approval. So the answer is at times of the approval. Do take notes. You need to allow sufficient times for this visa to be granted before your children turn 23 years old. So if let's say you have a child who is already 22 years old, in this, you know, I can only see that you can apply for 1AAC. That is the shortest processing time. But if your child is, you know, 18, 19, yes, you certainly have sufficient times to get a visa approval before they turn 23 years old.
Thank you. And the next question, can we apply solely with investment via properties? So I think this is the immigration question, right, Desmond? Or?
Yeah, I would think that, you know, I would like to get Scots to answer. There are some structure I believe that, you know, could be set up. There are some property funds or something. Yeah, Scots, can you? Yeah.
So unfortunately, the answer is no. So let's take the 188B and 188C visas. So half of your money can go into commercial property. That's the sort of closest you can get to maximizing out your exposure to property. So it doesn't matter what state it's in. It's a federal government program. But for example, our funds invest right the way across the eastern seaboard. We've actually now got, I think, we're bidding on a couple more, but we've got about eight assets in Western Australia also. But they're commercial property assets, and our assets are very defensive. So that's office that's backed by government tenure. It's supermarkets. We haven't talked about this. We can talk about it in much greater depth. And medical centres are our three sort of strategies that we put into our different funds. So you can invest in commercial property. You can't invest in residential property, and it can be about half of your money.
Thank you. Thanks for adding on, Scott. Okay, we have a lot more questions, I think, and we are running out of time. So I'm just going to go with the last two, if that's fine. And next question is for you, Orbin. Is this a good time to buy a property?
Look, depending on where you are looking at in Australia, if I'm doing where I'm focusing on in Western Australia, I don't see there being a better time to purchase than now for decades. Actually, it's been a long time. The market here is certainly on the way up, as it is in most parts of Australia, even regionally at the moment. But you've come off, 6 to 7 years of negative growth, which is normally a full cycle in Australia. And now we've just started to go up. So even apartments, some of the apartments, we've got incentives that when the market's going gangbusters, you don't get those incentives. So let's just say for people that are foreign buyers, the developers here are paying the FIRB approval fees, which is $5,500. And you're buying a property where in the situation with Perth Hub, your exposure is just 10%, and it should go up more than 10% each year for the next 2.5 years that it's going to take to build. So in answer to that question, I would say 100% yes. Now is a fantastic time to be looking at investing in property.
Good to know. So I'm going to just add on another question to you that just came, which is, my son is studying in Perth. Can I buy a property under his name?
Yes, you can. Depending on the age of your child, you cannot mortgage that property under his name, but you can certainly buy it under their name if you're purchasing it in cash. There's no problem. Just give us a call or get in touch somehow, and we're happy to help you with that. So the answer to that is yes, you can.
Thank you. So do get in touch with Orbin for that, please.
Just on that point, Audrey, will you be circulating the contact details for us to follow up on some of these questions? Is that the plan?
Yes, that's right. We have actually put the screen up with the contact details of RAM, GMS, and ResiWest, so everyone can just refer to the screen and get in touch, or you can also get in touch with us directly. Please get in touch with our company, and we can also help to arrange the appointments for the respective representatives. Okay?
Right.
Okay, the last question for today. For those who we've not managed to answer the questions, we will definitely come back to you sooner. Okay. Last question is, how much is the investment amount for 188A in Western Australia, Desmond?
Okay, sure. Now, as at 1st of July, the Western Australia State Government has removed, the 300,000 of net business asset requirement as before. So this requirement has now been removed. So, and it doesn't set a minimum investment amount. But that says under 188A, there are certain criteria of financial numbers that you should demonstrate. For example, having a net business assets of 200,000, is one of the requirements. So I guess that regardless of how much the amount you are investing into the business, so long you meet this criteria by having 200,000 of net business asset for the PR conversion purposes, and you are fine. So Western Australia government has not, is no longer setting a minimum investment amount starting 1st of July.
We're open for business, Desmond.
Yes, that's right, under the 188A. So that is good news. I guess, they are trying to also look at, the practical aspect, to make sure that people are coming in and meeting the minimum requirements that's set by the federal immigration, and make the whole entire move and the business setup easier to a certain extent. Yes.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
I think it's really high time we wrap up. The session is almost going to be taking 2 hours. So once again, for any one of you who's got questions, who wish to speak to us in a private consultation, you're more than welcome to get in touch with us. If it's immigration related, feel free to contact GMS visa application contact number on the screen. If it's with investment, it's RAM, and property, feel free to get in touch with Obin as well. Okay, so we can also arrange a session together if it's related to property and migration together. So don't worry, just contact us and we will arrange the best possible consultation for you. Okay, so any last words from any of you, Obin, Desmond, or Scott?
Just to say thanks for attending, and we look forward to serving you guys.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. Last word for me, stay safe, everyone. And just, live out of the best given the current situation. And and have a good weekend.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the very wonderful session. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll stay in touch with you all. Thank you once again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.